So we're making progress here. New day, new shirt, hopefully new ideas from you. In fact, I just spent a good hour and a half today working with my copywriters to brainstorm a big idea for a new offer that we are rolling out. We spend a lot of time on this stuff, and then the big idea becomes the mechanism, and we roll it all into one. This is going to be for our course called Ignition. We've, as I've said before, we've tried to write this in so many different ways. And what's interesting is that we're going to be rolling this out to people with a couple of different sort of promises and mechanisms, and we're going to split test those and see how they do. So hopefully you can take some great stuff away from what you just learned, and I'm very excited for what we have to cover today, which is decisions, objections, a whole lot of the stuff that you need to actually close a sale, because ultimately your goal is to get someone to make a decision. The decision is to either leave your page/website or make a purchase, and I think we all know which one you'd prefer. You'd much rather prefer that they make the purchase. And it may be obvious to you why they should buy something, but your prospect is going to have objections. I promise you that. We'll get into that in a little bit, but your prospect will absolutely 100% have objections. So let's talk a little bit about decision making before we talk about how to deal with objections. I always think it's both interesting and useful to cover theory before we get into tactics. Generally, decisions are not made rationally. And this may come as a surprise to you. If you've been studying marketing for a while, it may not. But generally, decisions are not made rationally. They are made emotionally, and then they are backwards rationalized and given support for them. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but it's just so important that you understand this and that you accept it as truth. Now, you can go on the internet, you can Google this. I'm actually going to share some interesting research around this point. But the big point here is that if you think that you can convince somebody to take an action by providing irrefutable logic and reason and bullet points that support your reasons and a well-presented argument, you are going to be far off. You're going to be in a far worse place than if you're able to excite their emotions and get them really pumped up about something. Logic and reason just do not work very well in persuading people and moving them to take action. That's a tremendously unfortunate fact, considering the fact that humans do have these higher order logical abilities that we've been gifted with, but we just don't seem to make use of them very well when it comes to making big decisions. So emotions provide, if you look into the science behind this, emotions provide motivation and meaning behind decisions. So how does this break down within the context of what we've been talking about? Well, the big idea is what creates the motivational center of gravity, the notion of, I've got to have that. So when you've got a really good big idea and a really good promise, that's going to get your customer extremely excited about what you have, and they're going to, that's going to provide that motivation. That's going to be the reason that they want to get this. Is this big idea? Is this big promise? And, again, that feeling of, I've got to have that. And then knowing your customer is what allows you to create meaning. So when we talked about knowing your customer, we talked about the avatar that you're building out. You remember we really wanted to understand everything about them, the thoughts that kept them awake at night, their irrational hopes and fears. I'm not going to run through the whole list, but when you're able to provide some context for your avatar and your prospect around, this is what life was like before and this is how life shall be soon, and when you're able to do that within an emotional context, that is when you create emotional meaning for them. So again, just to repeat, emotions provide motivation and meaning behind decisions. The big idea is what creates motivation, and knowing your customer is what allows you to create meaning. Where did I pull this stuff from? Well, there's a very interesting study that was done by a guy named Antonio Damasio and a few other associates called Emotion Decision Making in the Orbitofrontal Cortex. And I encourage you to go read this if you like to read dry research papers, which sometimes I do. But here's the 10,000 foot view. is that these researchers put decisions in front of people whose brains had been damaged in the specific area where they feel emotions. So if you want to rephrase that, if you take away the emotional ability of somebody and they remove the area in their brain where they process emotions and feel emotions, it's going to become very, very hard for them to make decisions. Even simple decisions like, should I have a turkey sandwich or a ham sandwich? So again, what these researchers would do is they found people who had, had damaged orbital frontal cortexes. Excuse me, it's difficult to say that. And and these people had lost their ability to relate to people emotionally. So in that sense, there's almost a sense of Asperger's or autism that they had. And then they presented them with choices, and these people just had a hell of a time making very, very difficult choices. So the point is, when you lose the ability to feel emotions, you also lose the ability to make decisions. And when you have the ability to feel emotions, you have the ability to make decisions. And what this means is that our decisions are very emotionally driven. So the conclusion of all of this is, and again, I encourage you to go read that paper, it's fascinating, but the conclusion of all this is that you must excite emotions first and then provide logical support to give people the ability to back up the emotions that they have. So to put this in context, like just when I was growing up, I remember when we would buy appliances, Best Buy didn't exist, the internet didn't exist, so we'd go to the appliance store, and there'd always be some kind of shady sales guy there, and he would try to sell you on the high-end washer or the I don't know, whatever the appliance was, the oven, and he'd get you all excited about it, and then he would provide the logical support. Well, your wife is going to love it because, obviously your wife doesn't want to spend a whole lot of time behind the washing machine. This will do the work for her. I specifically remember hearing that one said to my dad. So, again, that's one of those things where first he's getting him excited about, oh, look at this beautiful machine. Can you imagine seeing this in your house? And it's going to take so much time on your laundry. You're going to just love it. So he's getting him feeling good about it, and then he is providing the rational ladder of support to or infrastructure of support to reinforce that decision. So when it comes, so that's decision making. Now, you might be saying to yourself, as have many people who I've coached and counseled, well, hey, wait, my product is great. Everybody is going to want it. They're not going to have objections to this. And, my answer to that is always invariably, if only they were so intelligent as to understand how great your product is. This is truly an ego trap of a product creator. Every now and then an iPhone comes out or a Google comes out or a Facebook comes out, and yes, everybody wants it. But if you're selling anything other than the next big black swan of the technology world, then there's a pretty good chance that people are going to have objections around purchasing or interacting with what you have. Even if it's free, there is a cost, and that is the cost of their time and attention, which Mark Zuckerberg and all these people on the internet work very hard to own as much of that as possible. So don't have an ego about this. Understand that people are going to have objections, and the sooner that you can accept that and the sooner that you can go to work at batting those away, you'll be much better. And you've got to understand that most people have no idea who you or your product are. You have been working slavishly for weeks or months or years to put this product together, hopefully months, perhaps years. You've obsessed over it, and you've logically thought about, well, it needs this component and that component and that component. So you've really put your heart and soul into it, I hope. For someone else, they're seeing it for the first time. It's just, for your prospect, first time, second time, they are not aware of why it's important, what it means to them, or what context it's gonna, what benefits it's gonna offer them in their life. So for someone who's seeing it for the first time, of course, there's going to be a bunch of reasons why they're going to say, why would I give my time and attention to this thing? One other thing to know going into this whole game is that your conversion rate is almost always going to be depressingly low. We're all competing for the same attention. So if you've never bought traffic before, if you've never rolled out an offer before, if you've never written a sales letter before, it can be very tempting. And I've made all of these mistakes to think, oh gosh, like this is going to be different. This is going to be better. I'm going to win the game. And, all these other people just don't know what they're doing. I've got an idea it's just going to topple everybody else. So you roll out your ad and all of a sudden your click-through rate is not exactly what you're hoping it was, or you roll out your sales copy and you're not quite making the money that you thought you were. A big portion of this is having the right big idea, doing everything right that we have in here, and then having the right systems in place to capitalize on that. But it all starts with what we have here. And even with the best offers in the world, conversion rates are insanely low. So the game is to have the best offer in the world, and then to have a great affiliate or media buyer or what have you, traffic strategist, growth hacker, bringing people to your idea so that you can convert the ones who are the right prospects. What we see in, for example, an email might be, and this would be to warm prospects. So let's say we send out 100,000 emails. Typically, we'll have a 5 to 20% open rate, depending on which email we send it to and what the subject line is. From there, let's say that 10% of people open it, just to keep the numbers easy. We got 10,000 people opening it. From there, maybe 1% to 10% of that group will actually click on it. So now you're looking at 1,000 people to 10,000 people. I think I'm getting my math right. And then from that percentage, maybe 1% of people will actually buy. So it's not always that high or low. Sometimes it's 4% people will buy if it's a low cost offer. Sometimes it's 5% of people will click. The point is that your conversion rate as you go from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel is going to be something that you look at and you're like, oh my God, why aren't more people converting here? I love this thing. Everybody should be buying it. I've had those same thoughts. Every marketer, every product owner has had those same thoughts. And the fact is, you have to overcome objections for people to buy stuff. And even then, people are still going to not purchase it. So again, when I talk to people about this, their common refrains are, well, nobody will have objections. So I just want to make sure we're clear. Yes, people will have objections. They'll have objections you can't even imagine. So the best way to handle objections is to get your prospects so excited that they don't even care about the objections. So if you think about anything that has that sort of stampede effect, think about people lining up to wait for an iPhone. What are the objections to the iPhone? Well, the battery doesn't last very long. Or I'm trying to think of other objections in times past, like the 3G. When it rolled out, it didn't even have 3G. It was a 2G. People still lined up to buy it. The 3G was, I don't think it was the most state-of-the-art screen at the time. It was a plastic back. People still lined up to buy it. Why? Because they're excited about it. What happened when Tesla announced the Model 3? They had something like, hundreds of thousands of pre-orders in a 24-hour period. Why? Whatever objections people might have had to it, they weren't even thinking about it. They were just thinking about how excited they were to drive a $35,000 electric car. So again, the best way to handle objections is just have a big idea, to have this promise that is so exciting that people say, fuck whatever objections there are, I got to get in on this. Yet they will still have objections. And the best way to create that excitement with the prospect, we've talked about this already, is to have clarity, singular focus, an amazing big idea, and really clear writing. So I'm just going to repeat those. If you have clarity, singular focus, great writing, and a great big idea, those are going to be how you get your prospect very excited about things. And again, we've covered a lot of that already, and we will cover more of it as we go through here. So beyond that, okay, you got all that. You're like, okay, I know it, I get it, Jonathan. I am going to make my prospects really fucking excited. What else do I have to do? Well, you have to remove all risk. And you have to allay their doubts and their fears that this won't work, that this will cause problems in their life, that this will, be the wrong choice for them, that it's not a waste of their time. Your guarantee, we're going to talk about guarantees in a bit. Your guarantee will play a big role in this, but you still have to overcome their specific objections. So Let's talk about the big objections. And of course, you're going to have some specific objections. We're going to talk about the big objections, and then we're going to talk about how to work through them. So the two big types of objections are emotional and logical. So emotional objections they come from people who aren't sure if they're buyers. They're not certain if they're actually going to move forward with this. So those objections sound like, this won't work for me. It sounds too expensive. This looks really difficult. I need to think about it. I need to ask my husband or wife. Those are the sorts of objections where they're not so excited about it that they have made a purchasing decision yet. You know, if you think about going into a washing machine, again, an appliance store, when you go in, if you really need a washing machine, you're going to buy a washing machine. That's not going to be your objection. It's not going to say, well, you know, this won't work for me, this one over here. You might say it sounds too expensive, but only in the context of another washing machine. So specifically with first-time visitors, first-time prospects to your website or to your offer, if they say something like, it sounds too expensive, or this feels like it's going to be difficult, those are definitely, they haven't been convinced yet that what you've got is so important and so powerful that it's going to work for them and going to deliver that life-changing effect. So those are emotional objections. Logical objections, these are buyers, but they may not be buying from you. So for example, I can get a better price elsewhere. That would be, you know, a very logical objection. That'd be, you know, hey, I like your washing machine, but Highland Appliance over down the street says that they'll give it to me for $800. You know, that's a logical decision or objection. Or there's a competing product that I prefer. You know, I was thinking about getting this paleo book, but this one looks like it's got some better reviews, so I'm going to go with that one. Or this lacks features that are important to me. So, you know, when I recently went through the process of buying pants for travel, I looked at all sorts of travel pants, and I found a pair from Bluffworks, which, you know, could dress up, dress down, and had nice little anti-theft pockets. Those were features that were important to me, and they disqualified Lululemon, for example. So just to repeat, emotional objections, they're not sure if they're buyers yet, and you haven't really aroused them and excited them that much. And logical objections, they are buyers, but they're not necessarily buying from you. So those are the two big types of objections, and then of course there are going to be specific objections about how this would work, what kind of results it would deliver, and those are primarily emotional objections. So with all of those out of the way, we're going to pause this segment. We've talked quite a bit about decision making. We've talked about the idea of objections and the fact that you've got to just accept that there will be them. And we're going to move into how to work through objections, how to solicit them from your prospects, how to know what they are, and how to accurately and intelligently reply to them.